What's up, people? Joe Winko here, your favorite Hawaiian guy, and here's my next episode of Joe Winko Talk. So, this is definitely going to be a gloomy episode of Joe Winko Talk, but it isn't going to be a personal one about myself at all. I did mention this in yesterday's live stream, in one of yesterday's live streams, because I did 2 live streams yesterday. I'll have the link to those in the pinned comment. I'm going to be doing this episode of Joe Winko Talk is going to be about the deadliest tornadoes that have hit in history, the most deadliest tornadoes that killed the most people. So, the first tornado that I want to talk about is the deadliest one in US history, and it happened really long time ago on March 18th, 1925, and that was the Tri-State Tornado, which happened in the Midwest of the USA, the Midwestern region of the USA. It started in Missouri, then it crossed in through southern Illinois, and then it ended in Indiana, and it killed a total of 700 people. So, most of the deaths occurred in Illinois. 11 people died in Missouri, and 613 people died in Illinois, and 71 people died in Indiana. And this tornado holds the record of the deadliest tornado in U.S. history to this day. It's the deadliest tornado in U.S. history. Also, it had the longest traveling path of 219 miles, so it was a very long track tornado. So, I'm going to read the wiki article. I'll have the link to that in the pinned comment. But I'm going to read a little bit about that. It says that the tornado was first sighted as a highly visible and relatively small condensation funnel in the rugged forested hills of Moore Township, Shannon County, Missouri, 40 minutes past noon, so 12:40 p.m. And yeah, Missouri, for those of you who've never been to Missouri before, Missouri has like a lot of hills in the southern part of it because it's part of the Ozark mountain systems, and that's where it was first discovered. It says here that the first fatality occurred at 1:01 p.m. northwest of Ellington, because that's around the area where it started. And they said by that time it was really large, and several homes and other structures were destroyed. And they said that the tornado was traveling northeast, and it was causing $500,000 worth of property damage, and it destroyed the town of Annapolis, Missouri. Much of the town was leveled, but only 2 people were killed there. Then the tornado struck the town of Leadana, where mining machinery and several structures were destroyed, and 2 other people were killed. And in Bollinger County, 32 children were injured when 2 schools were damaged and multiple homes were completely destroyed. And also, deep ground scoring happened. Ground scoring is when the tornado tears out the ground and you can see just dirt and everything and soil, because the Jarrell, Texas tornado in 1997, it tore 18 inches out of the ground. I'm not really sure how many inches this tornado of ground this tornado tore out. But then it also destroyed the town of Bealey, Missouri. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but I hope I am. Forgive me if I'm not. And it also destroyed a lot of homes near Frona as well. Not sure if I pronounced that right either. Okay. The town of Cornwall was also hit by the tornado, and as the tornado left the state of Missouri, at least 11 people died in Missouri from this tornado. But it gets worse, trust me. So, next thing that happened is the tornado crossed the Mississippi River into southern Illinois, and this is a very common myth that people believe, that tornadoes cannot cross rivers at all and that they can't go across water. That is false. There's a lot of tornadoes that actually start over water. Those are called water spouts, and it's definitely possible for a tornado to cross a river. So if you're ever being chased by a tornado and you go to the other side of the river, don't think that's a safe place, because the tornado can definitely cross the river, as it did here. The Mississippi River, that's pretty wide. That river is like a mile or two wide in in Illinois, because I saw the Mississippi River. It's huge on the way down to Arkansas. I'll have a link in the pinned comments to the video of me talking about the trip to Arkansas, but we're getting off topic. Once it reached Illinois, I believe it gained power because it crossed the river around 2 o'clock, and at 2:30 p.m. it slammed into the town of Gorham, Illinois. It literally obliterated the entire town, and it killed 34 people, so that's way more people than it did in Missouri altogether. So it started picking up strength. The thing was a monster. So almost every structure in Gorham was leveled or swept away, and the railroad tracks were reportedly ripped from the ground. More than half of the town's population was injured or killed, and 7 fatalities occurred at the school in Gorham, Illinois. Because a lot of kids were in school while this thing was hitting. It's really sad because it killed a lot of children. So next thing it did, it swept through the town of Murfreesboro, Illinois, and completely flattening large structures of the town. Entire homes were destroyed, and many other structures were also damaged and destroyed. 35 people in the town were killed. Well, actually, no. Wasn't it more than that? Oh, no, it was a lot more than that. 234 people in the town were killed. So that's actually the record of the most tornadic deaths in a single city in U.S. history. Because in Joplin, Missouri, that tornado killed 165 people, but this one killed 234 people in Murfreesboro, Illinois. And 17 children were killed at Longfellow School, and 9 other kids were killed at Logan School. And I actually have a picture of the remains of Longfellow School in Murfreesboro, Illinois. Here's a picture of it. This is what it looked like after the tornado came through. It's very sad that so many children were killed there. But then, after it struck Murfreesboro, Illinois, it moved on to another town of DeSoto, Illinois, which was also destroyed by the tornado. 69 people were killed in DeSoto, Illinois, and many homes were swept away. And 33 of the deaths were the students who were killed in the partial collapse of the DeSoto school. And that record alone, 33 children, that's actually the most number of children who were killed in a school by a tornado. Because the tornado that hit Moore, Oklahoma in 2013, it killed 7 children, which is absolutely tragic. It's always sad to have someone die from a tornado, especially children. But here, it killed 34 children in the school, and that's the highest record in the USA for the number of students in a school to be killed by a tornado. To this day, it still marks the record. So, let me see how many people died in DeSoto. Yeah, 69 people. After a while, it kept going for a really long time, and then further east it hit the mining town of West Frankfort, Illinois, and it killed 152 people in West Frankfort. So this thing was a monster. And you know, the really scary thing about this tornado, it didn't look like a tornado. Because back in 1925, people didn't really know much about tornadoes that much, really, because they weren't allowed to say, the weathercasters were not allowed to say tornado on the news because that would freak people out and it would cause chaos and panic and everything. And another thing was, you didn't have, obviously, back in 1925, there was no YouTube, there was no, people taking pictures of tornadoes. Well, there were a couple pictures taken of tornadoes, but you didn't really hear many accounts of people who survived tornadoes. A lot of people did, but you didn't really hear about it very much. Because back in that time, people were pretty cut off and isolated. They didn't have the internet, you didn't have cell phones, you didn't have any of that. And it appears that they didn't even have warning systems that much, because no one really knew that this tornado was coming, because the day was looking fine and they didn't think it was going to be a storm. And they said that when the tornado came through, it looked more like a ground-hugging fog. It was really big, and it looked like people thought it was a dust storm or something, but it was really a massive tornado that was really wide and was ripping things apart and killing people. And people only knew that it was a tornado once they saw pieces of houses flying around in it. And by then, it was already too late because this thing was traveling at 70 miles per hour, which is another record for one of the fastest traveling tornadoes. And it's creepy because people always say that tornadoes travel really fast, but in all the videos I've seen of tornadoes, they never really seem to be traveling that fast. They always seem to be moving slow. But I'm assuming that if you're right up next to one, it would look like it's traveling a lot faster. But gosh. So it said that the tornado struck the northeast side of West Frankfort, Illinois, leveling many businesses and sweeping away entire subdivisions. It also hit a mine, and extreme damage continued east of the town as railroads were torn from the ground, and 300 foot of railroad track was ripped from the ground and blown away. Several small mining villages in the area were obliterated, resulting in numerous fatalities. The tornado then destroyed the small town of Parrish, Illinois, where 22 people were killed, and the town was never rebuilt afterwards. It just completely destroyed the town, and they never rebuilt it. But, however, I looked up Parrish, Illinois, like the general area of where it used to be, on Google Maps. It doesn't really have like a town center. There's a bunch of houses in that area, but there's no like library or post office or anything. It's just like a place where a bunch of houses are huddled together, really. But the main town and everything that you would expect in a town, like a library, a bus stop, or I'm not even sure if buses go out that far. It's a rural town in Illinois. And the town hall and everything, there's nothing there. It's not there anymore. It's just a bunch of random houses put together, really. That's how it looks like now. And there's no tornado damage there from what I saw on Google Maps either, because they would have cleaned it up by now. This thing happened way back in 1925. Okay. So then the tornado destroyed the town. Several severe damage and several fatalities occurred in the Ogla area. Within 40 minutes, 541 lives were lost and 1,423 were seriously injured. The tornado proceeded to devastate rural areas across Hamilton and White counties, killing 65 more residents before crossing into Indiana. An estimated 613 people were killed in the state of Illinois by the tornado. And also, Illinois holds the record for the most tornado deaths in one tornado in U.S. history. Like, 613 people died in the state of Illinois in one tornado in one single day. And it wasn't even a single day, it was a couple of hours, really. Well, within 40 minutes, because, wait a second, 40 minutes, because it crossed into Illinois at 2:30 p.m., but then it left Illinois around, like, 3:50 something p.m., so it was a little more than 40 minutes. And another thing is, in this tornado, 30 farm owners died in this tornado, and it's very rare to have a farm owner die in the tornado, but because they're always really weather savvy. But in this tornado, 30 farm owners died because farm owners always pay attention to the weather. But the thing was, it didn't look like a tornado. They didn't know that it was. It looked like a really dark ground-hugging fog. That's what they all described it as, and that's kind of another reason why I'm freaked out of fog, really, because there could be a tornado behind it and you don't see it coming. I don't really mean to get that phobia into anyone else's head, but yeah. And another thing was, a legend has it that when the tornado crossed the Mississippi River and entered Illinois, it started raining fish on the other side of the Mississippi River. And I definitely think that's true because the tornadoes have an updraft. They suck things up from the ground. And if it's crossing a river, there's fish going to be swimming in that river. And it's going to throw those fish everywhere. And it's really messed up and really creepy, really, that happened. And it's sad that all those people died. I felt really sorry for all of them. But many people thought that it was a judgment from God, because Southern Illinois, they had a lot of gangs and everything, and it was a dangerous place to live, really, back in 1925. Also, another thing, it was the stronghold of the Ku Klux Klan, the northern stronghold of the Ku Klux Klan. Like, a lot of Klan members were living in Southern Illinois, and the tornado wiped a lot of them out. But the sad thing is, there are a lot of honest and good, nurtured people who were killed by this storm. And a lot of children died too. That's another sad thing that happened. But it's not over yet. This tornado, after it exited Illinois, it still continued horrible damage. At 4 o'clock, 4 p.m., the tornado crossed the Wabash River into Indiana, and by then it was starting to weaken. They said that there were reports of like a large rope funnel in the sky, and usually when a tornado turns into a rope funnel, because it was a large wedge at first, but now it was just slimming down into a rope funnel, that means that the tornado is dying because the suction is starting to draw in, and soon it's going to dissipate. But even after traveling for 200 miles, because that's how far it's been traveling so far, the tornado was still a killer. It smashed into the town of Griffin, Indiana. That's a small town right off that's east of the Wabash River in Indiana. And it completely destroyed all of Griffin. I have a picture of the damage in Griffin. Let me show it to you guys right now. Here it is. It says that 26 people were killed in Griffin, Indiana. But if you actually go to Griffin, Indiana, there's a memorial set up, and they said that actually a lot more people died in Griffin than 26. It says that 70-something people died in Griffin, Indiana. Kids were walking home from school, because by the time the tornado struck Griffin, Indiana, school was out, and the kids were all getting out and walking home from school, and this tornado came in and killed all of them. And also, one family was hiding in their shop. They knew that the tornado was coming. They hid in the basement, and the tornado started fires, and it knocked their stove into the basement that they had on, or their heater. I'm not sure if it was their heater or the stove. They were trapped inside under debris, and they all burnt to death, and that's just absolutely terrifying, really. And hundreds of people were trapped under the destroyed homes and the destroyed debris. And even to this day, if you go to Griffin, Indiana, even though the tornado started in Missouri and crossed through Illinois, people in Griffin, Indiana still call it the Griffin Tornado because it was the most destructive tornado that ever hit their town before. I'm not sure if they were ever hit by any other tornadoes, but people still remember it to this day because people still talk about it to this day because their grandparents and their older relatives were impacted by the tornado. So the tornado kept traveling, and it devastated rural areas. But then what happened was the tornado was moving at a certain angle, but then it twisted another way under a cruel twist of fate, because I saw in one video of a documentary I was watching, a guy said that if it would have continued the direction it was heading in the whole entire time, it wouldn't have hit any other towns. But it turned up and it hit other towns. It clipped the town of Owensville, Indiana, resulting in 2 fatalities. Then the tornado roared into Princeton, Indiana, destroying half of the whole entire town, and it killed 45 people. Large sections of the neighborhood in Princeton were leveled, and a factory was badly damaged. The tornado leveled more than 10 miles. Well, no, the tornado traveled more than 10 miles to the northeast before it finally dissipated around 4:38 p.m. And it was 2 miles south-southeast of Petersburg when it dissipated. So in Indiana, at least 71, probably more, people perished. But I think that number might be inaccurate. I think it's higher than that, because they said only 26 people died in what's the town? Griffin. But if you go to Indiana, there's a memorial that has 76 names on it. So let me do the math. So that's 50. So if 71 people died, according to this article, plus the 50 they didn't count, that would be 121 people died in Indiana from this tornado. So that's still that's still an awful lot. That's really sad too. So, in all, 695 people died. Well, 695. Let me add the 50 that they didn't count. 745 people died in this tornado. I'm not exactly sure if that's true, but that's what it added up if you don't count the 50 people that the Wikipedia article forgot to count. And 2,027 people were injured, the majority in southern Illinois, 3 states, 13 counties, and more than 19 communities, 4 of which were completely obliterated and were never recovered, were in the path. And this was also the longest lasting tornado because it went on for 3.5 hours, because it started at around noon and it ended at 4 p.m., like noon, and ended at 4 p.m. You know, that's absolutely chilling, because tornadoes, most tornadoes aren't even violent at all. A vast majority of them aren't. This one definitely was. And most tornadoes only last for like a couple minutes and only go like 5 to 10 miles. Like, you will get a long track tornado every once in a while, but this one went on for 219 miles. That's crazy. And if that tornado would have hit today, the fatality count would have been much lower, but still, it's absolutely frightening to think about, and really sad that all those people went through that. Because even the people who survived, they lost their homes, and they literally lost everything. And I feel really sorry for all of them, even though it was a really long time ago. It's still really sad. But that was, that's everywhere that the tri-state tornado hit. But what I wanted to do, I mentioned the tri-state tornado in my episode of Joe Winko Talk that I did about the places I wanted to road trip to. I honestly wanted to redo that whole episode of Joe Winko Talk. What I wanted to do was I wanted to take a road trip through all of the towns that were affected by the tri-state tornado in 1925. They obviously rebuilt now, and there's no signs of damage. However, there is one sign of damage. Well, there's many signs of damage. The graves at the cemeteries. All the people who were killed by the tornadoes, they were all buried at the cemeteries, and they're still buried there to this day. What I wanted to do was, well, not for every single one of them, but because that would take forever, because there were so many people who died in this tornado, 700. What I wanted to do was I wanted to visit some of the graves of the people who died in the tri-state tornado and leave flowers by their graves. That's the same thing I did for William Norton's grave in Joplin, Missouri. I'll have a link to that video in the pinned comments, because I feel like some of them would appreciate that. Like, I wouldn't be able to visit all of their graves, because that would take way too long, because so many people died in this tornado. But there's only like a handful that stood out to me. There was one 15-year-old girl who was killed in DeSoto, Illinois by the tornado, and she stood out to me because she kind of reminded me of Anne Frank in her picture. I don't have her picture right now, but when I go to her grave, I'll show her picture in the video. There was also another person who died in the tornado that stood out to me. I think he was a soldier, because that's what it looked like he was in his picture, and he like fought in some war, and he died in the tornado. Well, he died from his injuries in the tornado, because he did survive, but he was heavily injured, and he later died of his injuries 2 weeks after the tornado happened, and a lot of people became homeless, and their lives were literally destroyed, because back in those days, there wasn't no FEMA or any disaster relief to help any of them. Yeah, the Red Cross came and gave them food and water for a bit, but afterwards, their homes were all destroyed, and they had nothing to do and nowhere to go, or no way to live at all. So that's the thing. You don't really read much about, like, you don't really hear much or know much about what happened to these people after these natural disasters occurred. It's like, oh, your house was destroyed by a tornado, and then afterwards, what are they going to do then? How are they going to survive or rebuild from this? Because it was much more difficult back in 1925 than it is now. It still would be awful now, but still. So that was the deadliest tornado in U.S. history. However, it was not the most deadliest tornado in world history. That record goes to another place that's very, very, very far away. A place that I definitely cannot road trip to at all, and a place that I'm never going to visit at all either, because I can't stand being on airplanes. There's an Asian tornado alley. Bangladesh, that's the specific name for the country, which is notorious for being ravaged by tornadoes. Apparently, let me show it to you on Google Earth. Here it is. Now, this is the Asian tornado alley, Bangladesh. It's a small country in Asia. Apparently, I think it's the mountains or something that causes the air there and the atmosphere there to be extremely unstable. But apparently more people die in Bangladesh from tornadoes than the people in the USA. Way more people die in Bangladesh than the people from the USA. And the deadliest tornado that happened in Bangladesh was the Dalatpur and the Satarya tornado, which occurred on April 26, 1989. It was the costliest and deadliest tornado it was the costliest tornado in Bangladesh history, but it was the deadliest tornado in world history. 1,300 people died in this tornado, and the tornado affected the cities of Dalatpur, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce these names, and Satarya, and it traveled east and then northeast into Satarya. And it says here that previously the area that the tornado hit had been in a state of drought for 6 months, possibly generating tornadic conditions. They said that around 6:30 p.m. local time, the tornado was first spotted southwest of where the majority of fatalities occurred. So, yeah, like, tornadoes, they don't always assume... Okay, before I say this, I just want you guys to know that tornado paths and the direction they're moving, tornadoes can move unpredictably. They can spiral into any direction, so don't just think, oh, the tornado's not coming this way because I'm this way from it. Usually tornadoes will move northeast or east. That's usually the way they travel, but they can swerve and take any direction, so don't put all your hopes into that. But if you're northeast of a tornado and it's getting bigger and bigger, you just better run and find some place to hide, or some place to hide underground, because it's coming right for you. And, you know, when I first read about this tornado, that it was spotted where the southwest of where the majority of fatalities occurred, yeah, that's really scary, really. So I think they said the tornado was southwest of them, so if the tornado is moving, which usually they always move, it's going to be moving northeast, and if the tornado is southwest of you, you better get underground or get the hell out of its way, because it's coming right for you. So this tornado traveled for 80 kilometers, and kilometers are shorter than miles, so it really traveled 50 miles. 80 kilometers, 50 miles. I have a map of, I traced a path on Google Maps of where I think this tornado traveled. And, you know, there's not much known information about this tornado because it hit, like, a really rural area in Bangladesh. And plus it happened a long time ago. Not nearly as long ago as the tri-state tornado, but it did happen a long time ago in a rural area of Bangladesh. Let me show you the path that I traced. Remember, this isn't 100% accurate, but it's just an estimate. Here it is. Okay, let's zoom in on it. That's the path that I traced. The reason why I traced that path is because I had it going through the cities of Dulatipur and Sataria. I'm still not sure how to pronounce that name. It keeps slipping from me. And it was really Deadly Tornado. Let me show you some zoom-ins of the areas it hit. Now, here's a zoom-in of Dulatipur, the one town it occurred in. If you look closely, it doesn't seem like a very populated area. It looks really rural. But if you look closely at the trees, I'll circle those for you, you can see that there's little houses nestled in the trees and everything. But still, there's not that many. However, when I zoomed in on the town of Sataria, yeah, it seemed much more densely populated there, and that's where I think the tornado was probably first spotted at first, because they said of where the majority of all the fatalities occurred, so I think that was where it was spotted at. They could still tell that it was the same tornado that came through from Dulatipur, because the ground scoring and everything, because it was rated an EF5, the most powerful tornado. It says how many homes were damaged. Let me see. Okay, so the tornado was estimated to be a mile wide and had a path length of 80 kilometers, aka 50 miles, and it traveled through the poor areas and the slums of Bangladesh. 80,000 people were left homeless by the storm, and 12,000 were injured. Sataria and Manakee were both completely destroyed by the tornado. And yeah, destroyed a whole bunch of villages too, between there and there. But the thing is, the reason why more people die in Bangladesh than they do in the other country, in the USA, Bangladesh is a really poor country, and it's very densely populated. There's a ton of people living in Bangladesh. There's more people living in Bangladesh than there are in Russia. Like, much more people living in Bangladesh than there are in Russia. They had no warnings at all, and plus, they don't have basements. Basements are very rare in Bangladesh, and I'm assuming they don't have storm shelters either. But nowadays, I was talking to one person who lives over in Bangladesh, and they said that nowadays they do have storm warnings now, especially after that tornado that happened, and he told me that people in Bangladesh still talk about that tornado that happened. Well, yeah, because it was the deadliest one in world history. 1,300 people died in it. You never hear of that many people dying in a tornado. And it traveled for 80 kilometers, which is 50 miles. That's roughly the same distance from where I used to live in Wisconsin, because I used to live near the Milwaukee area of Wisconsin. I didn't live in Milwaukee, but in the outskirts of Milwaukee. That's the same distance from where I used to live to Madison, Wisconsin. That's the capital of Wisconsin. Roughly the same distance. Not the exact same distance, but roughly. Let me show you how long that is right there. However, if that tornado would have happened in Wisconsin, people in Wisconsin never usually die in tornadoes because everyone in Wisconsin has basements to protect them. Like, you rarely ever see a house in Wisconsin that doesn't have a basement. But down south, where I am, that's a completely different story, and I don't want to know how it would go if the tornado hit where I live, because I don't even want to think about that. That's scary. But yeah, that's basically it for this episode of Joe Winko Talk. It's really sad and really gloomy, but you know, natural disasters, they do happen, and yeah, you can't avoid them, whether it's a tornado or a tsunami or a meteorite or an earthquake or a forest fire. They do happen. So that's basically it for this episode of Joe Winko Talk. What did you guys think of this episode? What did you think of everything I was talking about? Have you ever been in a tornado, and what happened? And what do you think of tornadoes? Have you ever seen one before in person, or have you ever seen a tornado video? They're pretty frightening. They are fascinating, but they're absolutely terrifying and frightening nonetheless. So that's basically it for this episode of Joe Winko Talk. Don't forget to like, Don't forget to comment, don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to like me on Facebook and follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr. So that's it. Peace out, people.